You're listening to Season 1 of Ding Dong Darkness Time. If this is your first time joining us, we hope you'll check out all the other episodes of this season, each one delving into the dark side of the arts. If you love it, tell the world. In the meantime, let's take a little trip, shall we? Hello, everybody. Welcome to the super special bonus episode for Season 1 of Ding Dong Darkness Time. I am Allison Dickson here with Chris Armstrong.
This is Chris, and I have to say this is an extra episode, and I'm feeling a little extra today, y'all.
Yeah, he is.
And what have I imbibed, Ms. Allison?
A bottle of peach Bellini wine from Trader Joe's.
It's a little embarrassing to say those words, not the Trader Joe part, but I just guzzled a bottle of peach Bellini.
He is white girl drunk right now. So...
Oh my God, where's my White Claws? O-M squee. No, I don't know if you noticed, I was a little, I felt more, what's the right word, vivacious on your finale episode about the dancing plague. And in recording world, this is minutes after. So yes. Now you're getting the full effect. You were getting like the early buzz, and now you're getting the dangerous buzz. Let's be clear. You just don't know what you're going to get at this point. So wild card.
I wish I could rise to the occasion a little bit, because I've been patiently sipping at my vodka sodas for the last couple hours. And, it's just not hitting me like that. Because I went out to dinner with my family. And so when you put a big chunk of food in the way of your liquor, it kind of just, it's just running up against that wall, man. Just like beating its head.
I ate pistachios before this. I don't think that's a filling meal.
Yeah, you're gonna go for a ride, and you know what? We're all along for it, Chris, and gratefully so, because we wouldn't be here right now if our loquaciousness hadn't gotten the best of us in our episode on architecture.
Indeed.
We had a whole plan to each do a feature on 2 buildings or structures of our choice, and then we were going to talk about our own experience with a haunting building. Not haunted necessarily, but haunting. An interesting structure with a past.
That was a very ambitious episode for us, that we would bring 4 topics plus a shared 5th topic within a roughly hour episode, when we are 2 very chatties Kathy. Like, that is not, it's not good. It's not good.
We are, and we should have known with our collective experience with podcasting.
Indeed.
From the Creative Commoners days up through 80s High and right now, that we were biting off a little more than we could chew. But we also didn't want to leave Ashmore Estates, which is going to be what we're talking about.
Indeed.
We didn't want to leave this one on the cutting room floor, because I feel that it is one of those things that when you have a long relationship or friendship with someone, there are anchoring points throughout it that you always go back to. And I'll always remember sitting behind you in German class and asking you for a piece of paper. That was our first interaction in the 9th grade. In fact, our teacher, I was going back a little bit. I was new to the school. I just moved down from Michigan, and I started about 3 weeks after the start date for that particular school. So they were already up and running by the time I got there.
And it was 9th grade. That's a lot of hard transitions, right?
Oh my God.
Hard.
It was awful. It was awful. I remember, though, it going better than I thought it would. In large part because you helped me out in my very first class. So I walk into this German class, and she's already speaking German at everybody. I have not had a single lick of any German at all yet.
Jawohl.
I sat down, and then she says, "Machen Sie die Bücher zu, die Brackenpapier." And I was like, what the shit is that?
Frowie, are you here? Frowie? Oh,
and I remember tapping you. I'm like, what? You're like,
you were like, was ist das? And I was like, es tut mir leid.
Yeah, it was so bad that I had to take tutoring at her house for about 2 weeks just to get caught up with the class. I actually went to Frowie's house.
Frowie.
And we sat in her kitchen, and she taught me how to conjugate verbs. So,
she was quite a character, but a very sweetheart.
She really was.
Very sweetheart.
And our friendship would continue on throughout the years. And as I say, anchor points. So we have a number of them, but I would definitely say one of the biggest ones involves what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely.
And it all started when I decided, because I was living out in Washington State at the time, and you were living in Illinois, and I or we or whatever decided I should fly out to visit and, hung out at your house for about a week. And one of the activities that we had planned, you had some haunted places or some interesting places. We were already doing Ding Dong Darkness Time without even realizing it.
It's true, but I'm trying to remember why we decided to do this. I really do not remember what the point was where we were like, let's go visit this abandoned location.
Well, remember, this is another anchoring point for us. Back in the sort of, I think it was 1997, 98, the fall of, we got into your stepdad's ancient Chevy Suburban and drove out to the corn country to find a haunted road. Remember that? We were looking to just drive down this creepy road. Like,
was it in Germantown?
Wilmington. It
Wilmington.
was in Wilmington because we went to the haunted hayride, for lack of a better word. It was more like we were in a chopped off, like a bus with the top chopped off
that
of
was
it.
the best haunted experience ever. Oh my God.
Yes.
That's right.
And so you had always had, I think, a fascination with these sort of reportedly haunted places just to see what it was like.
My cousins and I did that. My friends and I did that. You and I did that. There was just something, I think back then, of course, no internet, right? People at school would tell stories. Oh, there's this road in Germantown. There's this place in Wilmington. There's this X. I feel like we all had that where you were like, okay. And then they would tell the story and you're like, I got to go there. I got to go to there.
Yeah.
That's the joke, right?
The one in Germantown was big talk at the school. That was Jamaica Road, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought that was Fudge Road. There was a Fudge Road.
Oh, you're right. It could very well be.
And part of it was probably urban legend and folklore and all that kind of stuff. Not that those people didn't go, but the what's supposed to happen there. But there's just something, you're a teenager, you can drive or your friends can drive. You finally have this mobility away from your parents. And all of a sudden you're like, we need to go find these places. This is thrilling and exciting. And it's air quotes on the edge. Right?
Yeah, and it's great. I see my own kids doing this now, especially my youngest. Elias he doesn't often tell me when he's about to go do something. I hear about it after the fact, which I sometimes appreciate because then I don't have to worry about him as much.
I believe he's operating by the old adage, ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah, so I'll hear about the next day about this adventure where he went to this place, for instance, called Cornhenge, which is a field of concrete ears of corn that are about 7 feet tall in Columbus.
Interesting.
Which is about an hour and a half away. And we went there not too long ago. I actually have some pictures of it. But look up Cornhenge on Google and you'll see it's just this weird little art installation that's actually in the middle of this corporate business park in Columbus, Ohio. And it's a really interesting place. I imagine if I lived near it and I were in high school, I would have gone there to get pictures taken for prom or something like that. And I imagine that the kids that live near it do that very thing. But again, Columbus, this was about a not that far. I'm sorry. It was about a 90-minute drive, or about 85 to 90 minutes. And Elias had only just started driving at the time. So I'm really glad, again, he didn't tell me he was driving all the way to Columbus from here. But again, it's that feeling of, I can drive. I got a car. I got friends that can pile in it with me and we're going to go. And by the time you and I got around to doing this in this little adventure of ours in 2006, we were in our mid-20s.
Yep.
And yeah, we'd grown up a little bit and we were in our jobs or in our lives. I had very young children at the time and you were venturing onto your career. And at the same time, I think we still had that youthful spirit of let's go find something haunted. And we also had digital cameras, which were kind of a new thing for us.
Wow, that's true. Yeah, that was still fairly early days. You know what I think the connection was? A mutual friend of ours knew of this place because she grew up in that area of Illinois. And I think she had told me about it. And when then you visited, I was like, hey, I just learned of this place. We got to go. I think that was the connection point.
Yeah. So this place is called Ashmore Estates, and it is in the middle of Illinois, let's just say. At the time, Chris was living in the Champaign-Urbana area.
Yeah.
And this was probably about an hour's drive, give or take.
Give or take. It's south, so it's very central Illinois.
Yeah, it's Illinois, central Illinois, probably, I don't know. It feels that part of the country feels very similar to Ohio, Indiana. Yeah, you're out in the middle of corn country.
Very in the middle of nowhere.
And to the point that the roads at the time, and they could be very well now, they're not named, they're numbered. It's one of those
I think it's even on a gravel road, right?
Yes.
But the interesting thing is, despite its being in the middle of nowhere, there was a house right across the street from it.
Yeah. And when you're out there, and it was a hot day, we were out there in 90-degree weather, and you were driving a Mini Cooper on this gravel road.
That's right.
Was just one of those, we're just like, the further out we get and the more we're going down these roads, the more I'm thinking, oh my God, you could look out at the horizon and possibly see a tornado touchdown. It's one of those landscapes. And I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, but we pull up at this place and it automatically already looks terrifying in its own way. It's in the middle of this cornfield. And yes, there's a house across the street, but even that feels kind of remote. Everything feels very isolated. When you step out into the heat of this cornfield, the only thing I remember hearing was like that cicada rattle, like when it's really hot.
Yep.
And it's just insect sound.
Yep.
And nothing else. No other cars, no highway sounds, absolutely nothing at all. It almost felt like we were just in our own little pocket dimension.
And it's this building that is like an orange-red brick.
Yes.
Couple floors. It's built in 1916, so it definitely has an older look to it. And a lot of the windows are either open and or busted.
Yes.
There's some graffiti on the outside, and there is a side entrance where the door is not there. Is that fair to say, or was it like propped open? Now I can't remember.
I think it just wasn't there.
Okay. At the time, it was an abandoned facility. Let's be very clear. This was... And should we say what this building used to be? I guess we haven't said that yet.
Yeah, so I have a little something here. So it started out as a poor farm. And for people who don't know what a poor farm is, before the Social Security Act passed in the 1930s, if people had psychiatric issues or disabilities or, you know, something that affected their ability to live independently, the counties would fund these farms and homesteads essentially for people, like group homes, right? And so this was a place that housed a lot of people with mental disabilities and whatnot, but it wasn't an asylum. It wasn't a place where people were locked away. It was just a place where people could live together. They had a farm. They had the means to grow food and sort of tend the grounds of this place. And for the most part, it seemed the people that lived there were happy to live there. It wasn't a sad place. So get that out of the way for now. But it eventually did become a private facility for people with psychiatric needs in 1959. So that was well after the Social Security Act passed, and a lot of mental health facilities and whatnot kind of became state run, or they were private run, but they had a little more additional money. So they were able to be a little bit more well-funded. And it was like that for another 30 some years because it was closed down and abandoned in 1986. And for people that aren't aware, in the 1980s, that saw the closure of a lot of inpatient mental health facilities, group homes, things like that. So,
often referred to as deinstitutionalization.
Yes. And honestly, in my opinion, it's when things kind of went to hell in a handbasket when it comes to mental health care in this country. But it sat empty all those years. And when Chris and I came upon it in the summer of 2006, it was only just about to be converted into a haunted attraction. We had no idea about this at the time, though.
Yeah, in the late 90s, it was purchased with the intention to renovate it as a private home. The unfortunate thing is there was repeated vandalism.
Yes.
And that basically made the owner not be able to do what he had wanted, and therefore it remained abandoned for many years until, as you mentioned, Allison, 2006.
Yes. And so ownership, changed hands multiple times. And eventually the current owner, I do believe, because I watched a YouTube video featuring him, and it was back in 2018, but I assume it's still under this ownership, where the owner decided to make it a beacon for paranormal researchers. And he would use the money that the research teams would pay to be able to stay in and monitor this facility for paranormal activity. He would use those funds to raise money for kids who need prosthetic limbs. It's called the Lost Limbs Foundation. So if you are or know someone who does paranormal research and want to stay at Ashmore Estates to study it, any money that you give goes toward that cause, which I think is a really great idea.
It's fantastic.
So apparently, according to the owner and most of the teams that have researched this building, it's very active. And the great thing about it is because since the new owners have put in the money, or many of the new owners over that time between when it was abandoned and now, they cleaned it up. They, painted it, got all the debris out of there, put the windows in. So it's a functioning place now. Unlike when we went there, and I had no idea about the fact that it's kind of considered in the paranormal community a very active site. Like you can almost be guaranteed to get, I guess, some sort of reading or whatever it is they measure, right? Whatever they think indicates the presence of something paranormal.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's fun, but I don't put a lot of stock into it. But that said, I would absolutely love to go spend the night in this place, just to see if I do hear or see or experience anything freaky. It's kind of weird how I have one foot in the skeptic camp and another foot in like the curious and open-minded camp. Like, yeah, okay, I don't carry that belief around with me, but I would kind of like to see a ghost and be scared shitless. So make it happen.
But you were very driven by this building. So we show up at this time. It is certainly, I just want to be very clear, this is definitely private property.
Yes.
We went there knowing that we are not going to condone anything that we did. Not that we went and planned to do it, but once again, much like in the last episode, whether you plan to do it or not, the fact that you did it is trespassing, right? So we're not going to encourage that. We went there to...
It would have been fair game if we'd been arrested.
To be fair, yes. So we went there to walk around the outside and take photos, which we did. And as we're doing it, I see one Ms. Allison edging closer and closer to this door that, again, in my memory was either not there or was wide open.
I had no intention when we arrived of thinking that I would go into this building.
And didn't you say like you felt a compulsion, or not a compulsion, you felt compelled to go into it?
Absolutely, I did. I could not, I'm not sure that I could have, I don't know, consciously intervened on myself. And keep in mind too, I wasn't really dressed for the occasion. I mean, I was wearing a t-shirt and like capri pants or shorts or whatever like that, but I was wearing flip-flops on my feet. So if I had known ahead of time that I would be wanting to venture into an abandoned building full of debris, rusty nails, any weak floors, you name it, I definitely would have put on better footwear. But I think that's more of a testament to how drawn I was to go inside this thing. And I think part of it is this structure is looming over us. And by the way, this has inspired so many of the things that I've written in the years since, this feeling in this setting. In fact, the story Vermin, if you want to go read that on my website, AllisonMDickson.com, I would say fed into, that was inspired a good bit by my experiences at this place.
You'll never look at the word scat the same again after the story.
Right. So, But yeah, we were taking pictures and I was trying to zoom in and get pictures inside the windows and all that. But this open door was calling to me. It was, and the isolation out there, I think, played into it too. It was like, there's really nobody out here. And if we start edging closer and closer, if somebody caught us like on the steps or on the perimeter and said, hey, no people are allowed out here, just, clear out.
Scat.
Yeah. So I thought, oh, what's the worst that could happen? Thinking back on it now, it's like, well, the worst that could happen was somebody would have shot us.
Well, I'll say this much. As the observer, all of a sudden, Allison is inside this building.
I was inside it.
And as a rules following person, that kind of terrified me. But all of a sudden, I'm like, am I going in here too? And I did. I ended up going in. Like, it's not something I would have done on my own. But for some reason, you went in and you're being compelled to go in somehow compelled me to go in. Was that a small scale mass hysteria? Did we just?
I think it might have been because, like you, I too consider
Is that boutique
myself...
hysteria? Is that what we would call it?
Yes, it's
small batch hysteria.
Small batch farm to table hysteria.
Hyper local hysteria.
Yeah, it was locally sourced hysteria.
Yeah,
Oh
my gosh.
But I fall very much on the same moral spectrum in terms of that sort of lawful good. Maybe I think what we're showing is maybe I'm slightly more morally ambiguous than Chris, but I do feel like we're more or less on the same track. I honestly don't want to be ever arrested for anything ever, but at that moment, it definitely was not in my mind. My forefront was just getting in there and feeling the inside of that place, because there is absolutely, to me, while I do not profess to a belief in ghosts per se, being in a building like that or any kind of old structure, I have felt, I don't know, energies or vibes, or that's as close as I can ever come to say that I've had a supernatural experience. I don't even know that it's supernatural. I don't know if it's my knowledge or sort of that part of my brain that's always thinking about stories and storytelling. I don't know if that's just that part of my brain influencing me in some way, but I absolutely felt like I needed to feel the energy of that place draped over me. I needed to see it. I needed to see what was in there. I don't think anything really would have stopped me short of being told by a cop or the owner to get the hell out.
Yeah, part of it feels like a intellectual and or emotional curiosity that there's something about it. Because I totally understand what you're saying. There is a gravity to this place, even if you look at it from a perspective of there's nothing supernatural going on here. And I personally do not believe there is anything supernatural going on. And yet you walk into this place and you see what's inside, and you can't not help, if you're an empathetic person, start to think like, what did someone experience here? What is the story of this place? Why is this here, right? In this room? Why is this bed frame still here? And who laid on it and what happened? For me, the curiosity just sort of spirals and spins, and I can't not think about what was the experience of people here who suffered.
Yeah, and that is what goes into, I think, my interest in abandoned buildings in general. And also just houses that stand empty for a long time. There are memories in every place that people visit, and they leave an imprint. And I don't just mean psychically, I mean physically. They carve their name on the wall, or they, leave an imprint on that same wall if they punched it in anger, or if they kicked something, or if you look at any evidence of a person having inhabited a place in some way. If you took all the furniture out of my house right now, you would see outlines on the carpet and the walls of where our things were. And automatically you would want to start filling in those blanks and you could imagine how we might have lived. And that kind of thing just always gets the speculative part of my brain whirring around. So nothing was going to keep me out of it, I don't think. And once we were inside, we were very quiet. We didn't really exchange words. We were independently and quietly exploring this place. And I think the only time we really did communicate was when we were both thinking of going up to the 3rd floor, and we realized that the floors themselves were not very good. There was water that had dripped down from the ceiling on the floor below.
Yeah.
And I think there was also worry because there was a lot of debris on the staircase. And again, flip-flops on my feet. I think there was a big risk of stepping on, something with tetanus or worse. So we didn't want to risk possibly going through a rotted floor or, the deeper you go into a place like that, the more dangerous it gets.
Yeah, it's not a huge building. And yet we went down to the basement.
Oh, God.
We were on the entry floor. We went to, the 2nd and up to the 3rd floor. And there's something interesting about that 3rd floor. So it's this long hallway with a corner.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I really wanted to know what was around that corner, even though, frankly, it would have been probably the same of what we saw, right? It's broken windows. Yeah. There is debris on the ground. There are a few pieces of furniture that are still there, some overturned, some not. And there's graffiti everywhere that, kids or whoever had busted in and writing random stuff on there, whether they're trying to pretend like they were a person who lived here or not. You're just like, I know what a graffiti artist is. And, I know the mind of a teenager kind of a thing. So there was that. But nevertheless, looking down that hallway, and Allison said, we looked at the floor and we were like, we can't go down there.
Yeah.
And I feel like the few times we did talk, I may be wrong, I felt like it was in quiet voices.
We were being very quiet. We were acting like people in a sacred cathedral or something.
Right.
It was or like a museum. You just don't want to whisper. You don't want to talk too loud because it would just ruin the mood or something.
Yeah. And it wasn't because we thought people would hear us and we would get caught. It was just like you said, it's almost like you go into a sacred place. You're not going to be like, hey, what are you doing over there? You're not going to be screaming. You're going to,
and you don't want to be kind of like I guess in some way we didn't want to be like the vandalizing a-holes that went in there and just wrote on the walls and, messed some shit up. And, we weren't there to do that. We really just wanted to see it and take some pictures. And, I don't think we weren't trying to really do anything else other than just kind of observe it.
Yeah, I don't want to look. We trespassed. That was illegal. I'm not going to discount that. Nevertheless, if you want to go with a leave only your footprints mentality, we went in and out without having an effect on the place. When you go in there and you break windows, you turn over furniture, you spray paint the walls, that is more destructive than what we did. There's no shades of gray in the law, but I just feel like in terms of we did not go in and destroy the place, we observed it. Legal or not as it may be. And it's unfortunate that people go in and do that to places like this, but it's not uncommon, right? Unfortunately, it happens.
And I'd say that we left that place feeling very elated and kind of buzzed. We were just
like, oh my goodness,
what did we do? What did we do? And we were just like, our cameras were dying. And this is back in the day. We didn't have extra batteries. We had to wait till we got back to the house to put the cards in the computer and be able to see the pictures we took. But we were beyond excited. And this, again, very limited information. We didn't understand really a lot about the origins of the building. And honestly, I didn't know about any of the other paranormal stuff until I started researching this building ahead of this episode a few weeks ago, or, when we did our architecture episode. That's when I did the bulk of my research on the background of the building, because in a lot of ways, the mystery of that building has helped with maintaining the integrity of that memory in terms of the feeling, the emotional aspect of having gone in there, taken that risk to go in there and trespass and take those pictures and just really observe the years of abuse that building has endured. But what I eventually learned in my research, which I found really fascinating and interesting. If you go on YouTube and search Ashmore Estates, you'll find several paranormal investigative accounts, or channels rather, from people that have gone there. They stayed the night. They've paid the fee to the guy that owns it, and the guy that owns it is on one of those videos that I watched talking about the experiences that crews have had in there. And so there were two well-known deaths on the facility during its active period. One was a 5-year-old little girl who died of severe burns when her dress caught on fire in the upstairs area. It's like she got too close to a candle and suffered some very severe burns. And then another one was a maintenance worker who died at the facility following grave injuries he sustained after being hit by a nearby train. So he got hit by the train, he was brought there, and he died. And although the day-to-day living experience there was overall positive, apparently there are some spirits lurking around. And you can watch some of these videos and, believe or not the accounts that you see. I didn't see, even from their recordings, like you could hear some interesting stuff, but I don't know. I take a lot of that stuff with a grain of salt, but they apparently do call it the paranormal Hilton because it's accessible and it regularly produces some sort of result. So if you are an amateur paranormal investigator, or you just want to go to a place that, it's for the most part easy to get into, especially now that it's been renovated. And although they sort of maintained the old boiler equipment, and that whole basement is apparently one of the spirits likes to hang out around the boiler area. And when they were shooting scenes in that, all I could think was oh my God, we were down there. And scary as hell. And that's the thing, watching that, it's oh my God, we were in that room. We went in that room. But at that time, it was completely torn apart. It was dangerous. It was tetanus around every corner if we weren't careful. We went and did the thing. We went and took all our pictures. And then a few months later, that's when we heard it was being turned into a haunted attraction, for October haunted house kind of activities. And then a storm hit that area a few years later, tore the roof off the place. And I think that's when those owners decided, screw it, we're not doing it again. And then the current ownership took over and did the repairs. And
I just want to say that, we both blogged about it. We were both bloggers on Blogspot, I believe, at the time.
Yeah. Blogspot.
Yep. We were both into that, and we posted about it, and my blog is still up. And I went back and looked. So I was talking to Allison. I was like, the new owner messaged me. He replied to my blog post article and had a very nice response. It was very well written, but basically hey, this place is under new ownership and I'm taking responsibility for it and cracking down on trespassers. But he did it in the nicest way possible. It was not passive aggressive. It was more glad you enjoyed the place. Guess what? And I want to give a lot of credit. So those were the Kellys. They were the ones who took ownership. I mean, literally months after we went there. We really were in this crazy window of, if Allison came and visited me in Illinois 2 months later, we wouldn't have gone like that. We wouldn't have had that experience.
They would have had workers on the site.
Yeah. And they are very credited with taking this building that had been abandoned for 8 years, I think, and investing in it to build it up. And they were the first ones to really say hey, we want to turn this into a commercial haunted house. I think Halloween time they had a haunted house. They did flashlight tours. But as Allison mentioned, in 2013, a huge storm just basically blew the roof off. There was support damage. It was effectively said by the Coles County Emergency Management Agency, this building is beyond repair. And then the new owners came in and preserved the place, and as Allison said, are running it as a site for paranormal investigation. So I just want to say huge kudos to both of those owners for becoming caretakers of this building that otherwise would have just been leveled. And we wouldn't, in a decade or so, we'd forget it even existed.
It is in many ways, even if you strip out any of the potential hauntings and whatnot, I feel it's an important piece of history. And I feel that it's important to know, for instance, what poor farms were and what they contributed to society. I think that's interesting. And I think that, while we don't know exactly all who lived there, and really all we know is who died, who might the ghosts be, but this particular building was a home to many people over many decades. And I think it's great that it's still standing. And if it takes bringing ghost hunter teams in there, paying money to keep it going, I still think it's important to the history of that building and of the area around it to keep it up. And I'm really glad that they're doing it. And I feel like that day was just filled with like a really interesting, special energy. And I'm really glad that we experienced it. And then I'm equally glad that we drove back to your house.
Yeah, what did we do after? Oh my goodness.
I was just reminiscing with Brett from the prosecutors on this, actually, because earlier today, Guillermo del Toro tweeted that he reveres the movie Session 9.
Really?
And I saw this.
Wow.
Yes. And I retweeted it and said, this is quite possibly my favorite horror film.
Mm-hmm.
And Brett popped up from the prosecutors and said, also, same. And it's one of my first recommendations to people looking for something scary to watch.
Yeah.
And he talks about it. And then I went in to tell him what happened pretty much after this. And I said, yeah, so my best friend / co-host, we went and watched this one night, and it was that night. It was the night we got back from Ashmore Estates. We pop in Session 9. We'd already watched it, but we thought, hey, what better time to watch it than after you've trespassed into an abandoned mental facility.
Yeah, and to clarify, if you're not familiar with Session 9, it's not a very popular movie. It's not like The Ring or Blair Witch or anything like that. It's basically this asbestos removal crew is going into an abandoned psychological institution, this hospital for people who, in some cases, had very severe psychological illnesses. They're going to remove asbestos so that the county can basically use this space in a different way. And things start to go south. Like it just sort of unwinds from there. And I don't want to give much more away from that, but it's this very interesting interest. It's not like kids are going to spend 24 hours at a haunted house, and if they can get out, they get $1 million. It's not that trope. It's we're going to go do a job. And while we're there doing that job, we uncover things that we did not realize, not just the asbestos, but this psychological infection, if you will, that's in this building. And shameless plug, twofold. So on an earlier episode this season, Allison talked with Josh and Kelly from Press Play and Scream about the Twilight Zone movie, right?
Yes.
And I was recently on an episode where we talked about the movie Session 9. So definitely check out Press Play and Scream if you have seen the movie and you just want to hear a discussion of it. Allison was also on an episode talking about The Changeling.
Yes, I did The Changeling and Exorcist 3.
Exorcist 3, that's right.
Fantastic time, fantastic episode. They're so much fun to talk to. They are the ultimate movie nerds. And I love that you went and talked with them about that. And we're supposed to get on with them and do a talk about The Descent, I believe. So
that's going to be so much fun.
I am very much looking forward to that. And we'll make sure we talk about it here when that happens.
But what's so arresting about that movie, I just want to say real quick, to make this connection to what we did, is in this movie, there's this moment where the characters are looking down this long hallway, and lit from the side by the natural light is a old-timey wheelchair.
Yes.
And it just looks terrifying.
It does. And so that movie was filmed at the Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts. Which has largely been torn down except for the central building. A lot of the locations from the film have since been demolished, unfortunately. But honestly, that whole movie is a celebration of that building and its architecture, which is extremely gothic and intimidating and powerful. It is a remarkable bit of architecture. In fact, I kind of want to do an Architecture 2.0 episode so we can just talk about that place.
But then the thing that's crazy about it, though, is that it's like they got in there kind of at the right time to make this movie before, like you said, some of the buildings got demolished, similar to us. Yes. Similarly, when Allison and I were staring down that long hallway on the 3rd floor and we see this corner and there's like a puddle of water from some of the roof damage.
Yes.
I just had that. When we rewatched the movie afterward, those two experiences kind of merged in my head where I was like, oh my God, did we just live this experience in an abandoned institution, much like in this movie? So it was this just crazy overlap of experiences. And then I did the meanest thing you would ever do to a best friend.
Yeah, I will never forgive you for it ever. So first of all,
Monsters.
That was probably, I had already seen this movie once or twice before we watched it that night. And so it's weird though, because I already knew what was going to happen. But given what had happened earlier that day, it was actually one of the creepiest watchings of the film that I'd had. Probably the creepiest. And we also watched the making of documentary after we were up.
That's right.
It was late. It was like 4:30 in the morning. We had been up all day.
That was a marathon day for sure.
Very much so. We were in full amped up insomnia mode. And I'm sitting there after we finished watching the making of, and I'm feeling very on edge. I'm feeling very freaked out by everything, but I'm also exhausted. And Chris goes into the kitchen to get something to drink or whatever. And then all of a sudden behind me, I hear, "I live in the weak and the wounded," which is one of the most famous lines from the movie. And I jumped to the ceiling. I screamed. I was terrified. And then we busted out laughing at the same time.
It's so mean. I have this thing that I call the serial killer voice. And if you get behind somebody and you're just off to the side behind their ear, but you're off to the side and this is monotone like, "Hello, Allison. How are you doing today?
Nope.
I've been
nope.
watching you for a while." You know, it's like you just do this crazy monotone, creepy, familiar thing. And that's more or less what I did to you. And
yeah, it was the jump scare of my life.
It was so freaking rude, and yet I regret nothing.
No, you shouldn't. Honestly, I'll never forget it. And it was a great way to cap off the night in its own way, because I think I needed that in order to get a lot of the adrenaline out of my body. It was it just exploded. So yeah, and to this day, and again, I think it was a moment that helped solidify that memory into place. That whole day was, it really felt like one of those rare days where, I don't know, it felt like something more was going on around me. It felt like I was part of something. It felt like I did something. We did something that was outside our normal pattern of doing things. We went outside, way outside our comfort zone and challenged ourselves in a really interesting and profound kind of way. And 20 years later, almost, 15 years later, I feel, not a single regret. I feel like I remember it almost as well as I did right after it happened. It's a very intense memory. I think I'll remember it the same way forever. So I'm really glad we did it. I'm glad we've trespassed together and then now we can talk about it, many, many years later, and hopefully encourage people not necessarily to go out and trespass, but to just do something like that I don't know, that forces you outside that comfort zone and like puts a brand on your memory. I'm glad we're here talking about it now. I
mean, it's hard to manufacture those things. In some ways, they just kind of happen as a result of doing what you do. And yet I just feel like now more than ever, we really need to create those opportunities for ourselves, to have that moment, to remind yourself of the magic of the world, that it is out there and it's very easy to get jaded about it. But it does exist. However you want to describe it, it's there, which is cool.
Yeah. There are, in every town in America or around the world, there is a building and a house.
And a
there is
bridge.
a structure.
Always a bridge.
Always a bridge to nowhere.
A crybaby bridge, I swear. In every county, there's a crybaby bridge.
There is. In do some deep research. Find the places in your area that have a history to them, whether there's a haunting or whether there is any other kind of thing that you can visit. Go to those places. I tell you, so many of my favorite moments in life are visiting places that have a deep history. I have nothing but just this fascination for the things we build and the histories that we build in them, and they leave behind something. And if you do have that sort of empathetic antenna that you can sort of go and tap into that and kind of relive it and feel it and re-experience it in your imagination, it's a really powerful thing.
Some of my favorite memories with my friends and cousins was just driving down these haunted roads and turning our lights off and looking for something. We never saw anything, but it was just so much fun. We weren't trespassing. We're just driving down the road.
Yeah.
Granted, we turn our lights off, be safe, but nevertheless, it's like, it was this like innocent fun that we were having. And it was such a good time. And I remember those moments so clearly because we wanted so desperately to see something. And even though we didn't, we still had our own fun in the experience. It's cool.
And speaking of which, Chris, so this is a good time to announce that, not like a huge announcement like we're going to be guests or anything, but we are going to CrimeCon.
Yeah.
At the end of April. And I think this episode will be out by then. So we will be venturing into Las Vegas, the desert, and all the wonderfulness and weirdness that that place contains. And I'm really hoping that maybe we can have a similar type of experience there, regardless of when and where. We even have hopes of being able to record an episode out there.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things like, oh, here's an opportunity. Maybe we can find some, I don't know, really old hotel that has a history, or maybe I don't know. We could just find something. It's in Vegas, man. And we're going to break the law in Vegas by not having it stay in Vegas. We're going to do something in Vegas and talk about it here.
What?
Yes, it's not staying in
what
Vegas.
Happens
it's
in
going
Vegas
out.
Doesn't stay there.
And we hope to be able to meet some of our favorite podcasters and maybe pick up some new friends along the way.
Yeah.
And it'll be a big desert time adventure, but it is one of those things that when I decided to finally go and tell you about it too and pull you into this crazy adventure, it is one of those things where this is an opportunity to do something outside our normal pattern and to get out there and I mean, we've both been to Vegas, but I feel like that's a city where there's always an endless opportunity for discovery.
You know, I've been there like 3 times, I think, at this point. And I agree. The last time I went was when we were doing our former podcast, Creative Commoners, and our other co-host, Corey, and I went. And we had a lot of fun, and we even integrated it into an episode. And so even though Allison couldn't join us, it was so much fun. And I feel like now you and I get to have our experience all these years later. And that's going to be so much fun. I have no doubts that we will figure out some ridiculousness, whatever that looks like, whatever the shape of it is. And hopefully we'll talk about it on maybe another bonus episode of Ding Dong Darkness Time.
I do like this bonus episode thing. I think we need to keep that up, and we have a lot of fun experiences and anecdotes and memories and, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff in our almost 30 years of friendship and counting. So here's to Vegas coming up soon. And here is to officially wrapping up season 1. Looking forward to season 2.
Yeah.
And you need to think of an 80s topic that I could be useful on so I can come back onto your show.
Yeah. If you didn't know, Allison was on our 80s High episode talking about Stephen King's It. Not just the book, which is the 80s property, but we also talk about the miniseries and the movies that follow. It's a great discussion. It's very, very in keeping with the Ding Dong Darkness Time. So
yeah, we definitely, or I should say, I definitely brought a minor key / tritone to the 80s High
a devil's
situation.
interval.
Indeed. And such a fun show. So please tune in and listen to that wherever you get your podcasts. And again, press play and scream. Fantastic horror movie podcast
Yep.
with Kelly and Josh.
Yep.
And, you know, we're going to keep growing our sphere of influence and bringing more people in. And suddenly we'll have a podcast network that will rival that of Sirius XM, man.
You're listening to the Ding Dong Network.
We need to dream big. This is how great things begin, you know, from tiny beginnings.
Right. Hello, my fellow ding dongs. There's too much goodness there to. It's a ripe opportunity. Why would we pass it up?
The Ding Dong Network. I love that. It's already going on my vision board that's in my head because I don't have a real vision board. I'm too lazy, but I can always dream.
It's a lot of work.
So, but thank you so much for tuning into this bonus episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you will reach out to me on Twitter at dddarknesstime or Gmail at dddarknesstime@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach the show. If you have any ideas, comments, or leave a review on the Apple and let us know what you think. I may or may not highlight you if you troll us and leave a bad review. No, I really do hope you'll leave a review and you know, tell your friends. And if there is a topic that you feel like you could be an expert on in some way, if you know, please just reach out to me. Let me know. I mean, like I said, revolving stable of co-hosts.
You too can be a podcast co-host. But also, if you want to vote me off the podcast, nominate yourself, and I get.
Listen.
It's like in volleyball when you side out. Just side me out. Side me out. You're like, get that guy out of here.
Never gonna happen.
Get that guy
Chris.
out of here.
No, because you're King Ding Dong. Don't forget it.
I never liked those cookies, the ding dongs, the king dons.
No, the king dons. It just sounds like the generic version. Just get a goddamn Swiss cake.
You need
roll.
you need to find an old school box where they called them ding dongs. Like you need to find an old, was it Hostess? I think ding dongs before they renamed them king dons.
Oh my God, you're right. I'm gonna do that. I need to find a ding dong box.
Don't we all? No.
I love it. Okay.
Look at the time.
Ahem.
Look at the time. Ahem.
Ding Dong Darkness Time has been brought to you and produced by yours truly, Allison Dickson. It was made possible by an array of amazing co-hosts, friends, family, but especially you, the listeners. Big shouts also go out to the brilliant Nathaniel Dickson for the show art and future legend Spencer Morlock for all the music. I'll be back again soon with another episode. In the meantime, be good, you little ding dongs.